Informative and interesting times for the headlines. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson proclaimed a political earthquake after his thumping election victory cleared Britain's way to finally leave the European Union after years of damaging deadlock over Brexit. EU leaders said they were ready for the next phase of Brexit just hours after the resounding victory of Prime Minister Boris Johnson's party that all but seals Britain's divorce from the bloc. Elite soldiers retrieved 6 bodies from New Zealand's volatile White Island volcano, winning praise for a courageous mission carried out under the threat of another eruption. 23 cases of Ebola have been recorded in 4 days in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where deadly violence is hampering efforts to end the 16-month-old epidemic, according to authorities. I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us, and now to the news. Prime Minister Boris Johnson hailed a political earthquake after securing a sweeping election win, which clears the way for Britain to finally leave the European Union next month after years of political deadlock. With almost all results declared for the 650-seat parliament, Johnson's Conservative Party had secured 362 seats, its biggest majority since the heyday of Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s.
I want to thank the people of this country for turning out to vote in a December election that we didn't want to call, but which I think has turned out to be a historic election that gives us now, in this new government, the chance to respect the democratic will of the British people.
By contrast, the main opposition Labour Party endured a terrible night, losing 59 seats to 203, forcing leader Jeremy Corbyn to announce plans for his departure.
I want to also make it clear that I will not lead the party in any future general election campaign. I will discuss with our party to ensure there is a process now of reflection on this result and on the policies that the party will take going forward. This is obviously a very disappointing night for the Labour Party with the result that we've got. But I want to say this: in the election campaign, we put forward a manifesto of hope, a manifesto of unity, and a manifesto that would help to right the wrongs and the injustices and inequalities that exist in this country. Brexit has so polarised and divided debate in this country. It has overridden so much of a normal political debate. And I recognise that has contributed to the results that the Labour Party has received this evening all across this country.
But like all Labour voters in this constituency and beyond, I feel a bitter disappointment at the result that appears to be unfolding tonight. I feel distraught that we have lost so many great comrades in Parliament, and I also feel so disappointed for all the brilliant candidates I've met around the country who will have to wait their time to be in Parliament. This duplicitous, gutless, reckless Prime Minister has been elected on one issue alone, wrapping himself in the lie that he is the only person to get Brexit done. We may be hurting tonight, but we are not beaten. We will tell Boris Johnson no. Our fight is not over, our fight is just starting, and we will fight with the same spirit that we showed. We will fight with the same courage that my friend Jeremy showed, and we will fight with the same unity the party showed throughout the election campaign.
Meanwhile, the world reacted to Prime Minister Johnson's wins. Congratulations, says Boris Johnson, for this clear election win. I look forward to our further cooperation towards the friendship and close partnership of our countries, according to German Chancellor Angela Merkel in a statement posted by her spokesman on Twitter. Russia doubts improved ties. The Kremlin said it was not sure that the conservative victory would bring good relations with Russia, which have been strained in recent years. I don't know what extent such expectations are appropriate in the case of the conservatives, according to Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov to journalists. This is not just a political victory, it is first and foremost a victory of values, according to Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz, as he congratulated Boris Johnson. Congratulations at Boris Johnson on a resounding victory and being returned as UK PM, tweeted Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Looking forward to the stability this brings and a new deal for Oz with the UK. Say good day to the quiet Britons for us. U.S. President Donald Trump on Friday congratulated UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson on his election victory, saying their two countries were now free to strike a massive new trade deal. Congratulations to Boris Johnson on his great win, Trump tweeted. Britain and the United States will now be free to strike a massive new trade deal after Brexit, and this deal has the potential to be far bigger and more lucrative than any deal that could be made with the EU. Celebrate Boris. Prime Minister Johnson has touted a U.S. trade deal as a prize of Britain leaving the EU, but the opposition Labour Party claims this will open up Britain's much-loved National Health Service to U.S. firms. The British Prime Minister has repeatedly denied this, and President Trump, who said on a previous visit that everything is on the table, insisted last week he had no interest in the NHS. And Prime Minister Boris Johnson hailed a political earthquake in Britain after his thumping election victory. That has now cleared the way for the country to finally leave the EU next month after years of paralyzing deadlock. With all but one result declared for the 650-seat parliament, Prime Minister Johnson's Conservative Party has secured 364 seats. It is the biggest majority since the heyday of Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s, and condemning more than 3 years of political wrangling over Brexit, Prime Minister Johnson vowed in his victory speech to put an end to, quote, all that nonsense and get Brexit done on time by January 31, no ifs, no buts.
And with this mandate and this majority, we will at last be able to do what? You've been paying attention. Because this election means that getting Brexit done is now the irrefutable, irresistible, unarguable decision of the British people. And with this election, I think we've put an end to all those miserable threats of a second referendum. Your hand may have quivered over the ballot paper as before you put your cross in the Conservative box. And you may intend to return to Labour next time round. And if that is the case, I am humbled that you have put your trust in me and that you have put your trust in us. And I and we will never take your support for granted. And at the same time, this One Nation Conservative government will massively increase our investment in the NHS, the health service that represents the very best of our country, with this single beautiful idea that whoever we are, rich, poor, young, old, the NHS is there for us when we are sick. And every day that service performs miracles. As the nation hands us this historic mandate, we must rise to the challenge and to the level of expectations. And Parliament must change so that we in Parliament are working for you, the British people.
With such a large majority of MPs, Prime Minister Johnson will be able to get the divorce deal he struck with Brussels through Parliament in time to meet the January 31 deadline. EU Council President Charles Michel said the bloc was set for talks.
My point is very clear. The European Union, we are ready. We have decided what are our priorities.
Meanwhile, voters gave their views on the UK general elections after Boris Johnson's Conservative Party won the majority. Let's take a listen.
I thought it was pretty predictable. I think the tone of the election to date would have predicted that as an outcome. I think it's a bit of a condemnation of Corbynistic politics. And I think probably the majority of the UK now want to see that political mandate delivered to leave the European Union.
To be totally honest, I don't actually know the results at the moment because I've not watched the telly this morning, but I do know that I did vote, so that was good.
I was very happy and relieved that we can get Brexit done. I mean, I wouldn't tell you how I voted and what I voted for, but I believe it was the will of the people and they should have honoured the referendum results.
I just don't know. I can only see Brexit being either kicked further down the lane or no deal. I can see lots of trade deals with the US, which worries me, especially when it comes to medicine. I can see the NHS just slipping through our fingers. And yeah, I'm very worried.
No, I'm chuffed. I think, Boris has got that mandate to deliver Brexit now. That's all he needs to do. We've been stuck for the last however many months with a parliament that can't do anything, so it's good.
The outcome should allow Prime Minister Johnson, a figurehead of the original 2016 EU membership referendum, to push his divorce deal with Brussels through Parliament and take Britain out of the bloc on January 31st. But he still has to negotiate a new economic partnership with the European Union, which remains Britain's biggest trading partner, for businesses to continue operating smoothly on both sides of the channel. Failure to do so by the end of 2020 would push Britain into uncharted waters and have unknown repercussions for global markets and international trade. Meanwhile, Democrats have set a vote on impeachment charges against President Donald Trump for Friday morning U.S. time after a frequently caustic 14-hour debate with Republicans over the U.S. leader's alleged misconduct in seeking political support from Ukraine. In a shock late-night end to a marathon hearing of the House Judiciary Committee on Thursday, Chairman Jerry Nadler abruptly postponed a final vote on the two articles of impeachment, saying he wanted to give committee members time to search their conscience over the evidence presented against the U.S. leader. Surprised Republicans bitterly accused Nadler of running a kangaroo court.
The Judiciary Committee will please come to order. If you want a dictator, then you subvert the ability of Congress to hold the executive in check. What is central here is, do we want a dictator? No matter how popular he may be, no matter how good or bad the results of his policies may be, no president is supposed to be a dictator in the United States. When I hear colleagues of mine arguing that Congress is unpopular and therefore obstruction of Congress is a good thing, this shows terrible ignorance or lack of care for our institutions, for our democracy, for our form of government, and for our liberties. I, for one, will protect our liberties, will do everything I can to protect our liberties, our democracy, our free and fair elections, and the separation of powers that says Congress and the President and the Judiciary check each other, and nobody can be a dictator.
Mr. Nadler scheduled a vote on the two impeachment articles against President Trump, abuse of power and obstruction of justice, for 10 a.m. Friday. The result is not in doubt. Democrats hold a strong majority on the committee and are expected to vote unanimously to pass them, while Republicans will stick together in opposition. The articles will then be sent to the entire House for a final vote on Wednesday. Should the Democratic majority chamber vote against President Trump as predicted, he will become only the third U.S. president to be impeached and placed on trial in the Senate. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi dismissed concerns that a handful of moderate Democrats could defect and oppose impeachment, in part because they fear voters will turn against them in the November 2020 election.
People have to come to their own conclusions. They've seen the facts as presented at in the Intelligence Committee. They've seen the Constitution as They know it, they take an oath to protect and defend it, but they see the constitutional experts speak about it, they'll make their own decisions. I don't say anything to them. We see that as our responsibility to keep the republic instead of an attitude of Article 2 says I can do whatever I want. That's not what our founders had in mind. That's a president king. That's not what we're about here. No one is above the law. The president will be held accountable for his abuse of power and for his obstruction of Congress.
Meanwhile, Republicans accuse Democrats of failing to produce evidence and of acting on strictly political motives and hate for President Trump.
Whiplash. Whiplash, that's how some people describe the major announcements House Democrats have delivered. Whiplash. Whiplash, that's how some people describe the major announcements House Democrats have delivered this week. Think for a moment what we saw on Tuesday. Speaker Pelosi continued to follow through on her caucus long-term goals of removing the president, our duly elected president, from office. As she made that announcement in less than 1 hour, she had another press conference to announce that she will finally relent and allow USMCA, United States, Mexico, and Canada agreement to come forth. In a talk just this week or last week, she said she's been working on impeachment for the last 2.5 years, 22 months. Long before any phone call in Ukraine. The most disturbing of all this year, Speaker Pelosi laid out her requirements to even move forward with impeachment. Where she said it was so divisive to this nation, it'd have to be overwhelming, compelling, and bipartisan. She did not meet one of her requirements, that we will not repeat this. We will not do what Alexander Hamilton feared most. That if we are entrusted with the majority, we would govern with responsibility, regardless who is in the White House. That we'd uphold the Constitution. We'd actually stand by the requirements that Speaker Pelosi gave, overwhelming, compelling, and bipartisan, but more importantly, stand to the level of Constitution. That we would govern differently, that we would not use our power simply for the sake of a dislike of another individual.
Former U.S. President Barack Obama spoke to hundreds of participants at a Obama Foundation conference in Kuala Lumpur on the ex-leader's first visit to the Southeast Asian nation since the end of his presidency. Take a look.
And by the way, some decisions that were painful, and I still to this day am not absolutely positive I was right. Like my decision not to launch another military intervention to stop the bloodshed in Syria is an example of just a hard question. Us intervening again and occupying again another Muslim country in the Middle East was going to lead to a better outcome, and yet there were children who were being slaughtered. And you had a government that didn't care about displacing millions of people. And the question, what responsibility did we have for that? I am still optimistic that we can slow the advancement of a warming planet. It's too late for us not to have some impacts. There is going to be a generational element to this. Old people are not going to worry about this as much as young people because they're going to be gone when the full effects of this are felt. So you're going to have more urgency and educate your communities in ways that right now people don't think about.
Elite soldiers retrieved 6 bodies from New Zealand's volatile White Island volcano on Friday, winning praise for a courageous mission carried out under the threat of another eruption. At first, light 2 military helicopters set off from Wakatani Airport for the offshore volcano, where an eruption Monday killed at least 16 people and severely injured dozens more. The goal of the team from the bomb disposal squad was to recover the remains of 8 people still on New Zealand's most active volcano, which sits semi-submerged 50 kilometers out to sea. After a tense 4-hour wait, while volcanologists monitored live seismic feeds for signs of another explosion, police said the majority of the bodies had been safely airlifted to a naval frigate anchored off the coast.
Firstly, I would like to acknowledge everybody that's been involved in today's operation to recover and return 6 loved ones to their whānau. This entire event has been a traumatic and harrowing event for the community of Whakatane, but particularly for the friends, family, whānau of those directly affected. Fortunately, there remains 2 more people that we need to find so we can also return them.
That they carried out their role with dignity and respect for those who have been lost. I hope the time comes when we can all pay tribute to what they did today, because although the best science, best information available was used to try and make sure that we looked after them, there was, of course, a huge amount of courage still required to do what they did today. Yes, so as you well know, we've brought six back to the mainland today. There is a huge determination from those that I've visited to make sure that they do everything they can to locate those that haven't been brought back. So there will be an ongoing operation, and that's something that we're going to leave those expert teams, those expert dive teams, to undertake.
On the eve of the operation, GeoNet volcanologist Nico Fernier said the dangers facing recovery teams if an eruption occurred included magma, superheated steam, ash, and cannonball-like rocks thrown from the caldera at supersonic speed. As the military began their grim task, police took grieving families out near the volcano on a boat to perform or to visit the area on the shore as the island smoldered in the distance. Despite the risk of an eruption inside 24 hours being put at 50 to 60%, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said those involved wanted to help grieving families.
We know that reunification won't ease that sense of loss or grief, because I don't think anything can. But we felt an enormous duty of care as New Zealanders to make sure that we brought their family members.
New Zealand Police Dive Team, supported by the Defence Force personnel, deployed today. They haven't found anybody as yet, and they are working together to plan for tomorrow. They will redeploy, and it will be the New Zealand Police Dive Team and some of the Navy dive team as well. So Defence will work with police, and it will be ongoing.
The recovery had been on hold for days as poisonous gases continued billowing from the volcanic vent, and the island remained blanketed in a thick layer of acidic ash. While troops were recovering the bodies, another 28 people, mostly tourists, who had been on a day trip to see the natural wonder, were still being treated in hospitals across New Zealand and Australia, many in a critical condition suffering severe burns. The survivors' injuries are so severe, New Zealand doctors initially estimated they would need to import 1.2 million square centimeters of skin for grafts. A total of 47 people were on the island during the eruption, hailing from Australia, the US, Britain, China, Germany, Malaysia, and New Zealand. A coronial process has begun to identify those confirmed dead, but police have said it could take some time. And jubilant Bougainville residents celebrated days after they voted to secede from Papua New Guinea. Take a look. Papua New Guinea's Prime Minister joined the thousands of these jubilant residents as they celebrated days after they voted to secede from his country, but cautioned that hard work lay ahead if the region is to secure its independence. Referendum results delivered this week saw 98% of Bougainvilleans reject greater autonomy inside Papua New Guinea in favor of a split from their neighbors across the Solomon Sea. The landmark vote was the cornerstone of a 2000 2001 peace agreement that followed a brutal decade-long civil war between rebels, Papua New Guinea security forces, and foreign mercenaries that left up to 20,000 people dead. A long political process lies ahead, and leaders face formidable financial and administrative challenges to turn a cluster of poor Pacific islands into a fully fledged nation. The 10-year war that ended in 1998 was rooted in a struggle over revenues from the now shuttered Panguna copper mine, which at one point accounted for more than 40% of Papua New Guinea's exports. Bougainville is also considered to have rich agricultural land and relatively large fish stocks. Meanwhile, internet access was cut in India's northeastern city of Guwahati on Friday as thousands gathered for fresh protests against a new citizenship law, a day after police shot dead 2 demonstrators. The Citizenship Amendment Bill, or CAB, signed into law by the Indian president late on Thursday, allows for the fast tracking of applications from religious minorities from 3 neighboring countries, but not Muslims. Take a look.
Citizenship Amendment Bill. So actually the people who are residing in the neighboring countries, so mainly Hindu Bengalis, so they might be applying for citizenship in India, and for that we cannot take any more refugees here.
It's nothing but petty vote bank politics, which we hate. India is a secular country and we will not consider politics on the basis of religion.
Protests erupted this week after the government introduced new legislation that many in the far-flung northeast believe will give citizenship to immigrants from neighboring Bangladesh, and which other critics say is anti-Muslim. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe canceled a visit to the city due to begin on Sunday as the security situation deteriorated. The Japanese leader had been slated to hold talks with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. On Thursday, police had fired live and blank rounds as thousands of demonstrators in Guwahati and elsewhere took to the streets, some vandalizing property and even torching vehicles. Famine is only months away in South Sudan, where catastrophic flooding has pushed millions of people into a humanitarian emergency. That is according to the head of the UN World Food Program. Now, the government declared a state of emergency in late October in Bahr el Ghazal, Greater Upper Nile, and Greater Equatoria. David Beasley, WFP Executive Director, said that close to 1 million people had been affected, with a huge amount of livestock and crops lost, although more than 5 times that number are likely to go hungry in early 2020.
South Sudan is in trouble, serious trouble, not just because of the conflict, because of the rains and the flooding that's hit in the last few months. It's much worse than we anticipated. And in fact, if we don't get $100 million in the next few weeks and next month, we literally are talking about a famine in the next few months. We need support, we need help, and we need it now. It's not about WFP. It's about the little boys and little girls and families that we need to save.
The development follows years of political violence in the world's youngest nation that have largely subsided, according to UN peacekeepers, UNMISS, although deadly inter-communal clashes have also continued. Today, humanitarian assistance provides a lifeline in most areas of South Sudan, according to WFP. It helps 4.6 million people but needs $270 million for the next 6 months, with $1.5 billion needed overall through next year. A rally is held in Hong Kong Central District, marking 6 months since the start of protests, with demonstrators calling for greater democratic freedom.
Actually, we are very disappointed that the government arranged the police to attack us, to hurt our students and the elderly.
Protests have rocked Hong Kong for more than 6 months, with up to 2 million people taking to the streets, initially against a now-shelved extradition bill. Latterly, one of the core demands of protesters, alongside fully free elections, has been an inquiry into the police, who have been left to battle increasingly violent black-clad activists and are now loathed by significant chunks of the deeply polarized population. Meanwhile, hundreds of mourners paid respect to a memorial service for a Hong Kong student whose death led to some of the most violent clashes in 6 months of democracy protests. Take a look.
我哋香港人係唔會忘記任何一個係為咗呢一件事，為咗你喺呢半年入邊犧牲嘅任何一個手足。咁既然周同學今日係最後一程，咁我想同佢配合佢屋企人一齊送埋佢走。
Eagle News will be right back.
Is to stay cool to touch even on the hottest summer days. Blue-green ocean waves and the warm ocean breeze. There's no wonder why Dr. Beach has named Siesta Key, Florida, the #1 beach in the United States. Don't forget to watch episodes of Digital Nest every Tuesday and Thursday at 7:30 p.m. I'm Melissa Protest, coming to you from Siesta Key, Florida, and I am one with 25.
A crushing election victory for Britain's Conservative Prime Minister Boris Johnson sent delight through UK markets on Friday, with the pound the prime beneficiary. Take a look. London's FTSE 100 index rallied 0.9% to 7,335.23 points in early morning deals as investors gave their verdict, reversing initial opening losses. The capital's second-tier FTSE 250 index, meanwhile, soared 4% in value. The Conservative Party has secured an historic mandate with a thumping victory, providing clarity for investors where there was confusion, said analyst Neil Wilson at the trading site markets.com. Sterling had jumped overnight to hit $1.35.3514, its highest level since mid-2018. Johnson's governing Conservative Party has swept to a big win, securing 362 seats out of the 650-seat parliament, with almost all results declared. Now, that was the biggest Conservative majority since Margaret Thatcher's heyday in the 1980s and forced main opposition Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn to signal his departure. And here's analyst Neil Wilson of markets.com. He said that UK markets are seeing a recalibration brought about by the Conservative Party's large general election win, with some indices rising to record levels on confidence that the government's majority will bring stability and certainty. In late morning deals, London's FTSE, as you saw earlier, London's FTSE 100 shares index leaped 1.8%, and the capital second-tier FTSE 250 soared 4.3%. Investors expressed relief that Prime Minister Boris Johnson roundly defeated main opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, which had vowed to renationalise formerly state-owned companies.
Yes, for the UK market and the mid-caps and the FTSE 250, it's an all-time high. So really strong confidence returning to the market there. In terms of the FTSE 100, I think you still see a bit of a drag from the stronger pound, so that correlation where the stronger pound hits some of the big dollar earners like Shell and Diageo. Yeah, I think the scale of the majority is really important because it gives the Conservative government a huge amount of leeway, a lot of flexibility to get the Brexit deal done, to take steps on the economy and so on. So there's a lot of there's a big difference between a majority of sort of 70-80 compared to a majority of say 15, which is a lot less workable. I don't think it's a blip, it's really a sort of recalibration of where the market thinks assets should be. UK stocks have been massively undervalued. They've been very cheap versus European and US peers for some time. And I think the market's just recalibrating based on the new found certainty that we're hoping for from the Tory government. And then largely there is a sense of relief that there's not going to be nationalisation, there's not going to be higher taxes, there's not going to be handing out shares to workers of the largest companies. So lots of relief, but also lots of hope that once Brexit does get achieved, that the UK can start to grow to its full potential.
Don't push in the overcrowded corridors of Châtelet Metro Station in the middle of rush hour. Overwhelmed commuters are trying desperately to get to work. Transport provider RADP is providing a minimum service on just a few metro lines on the 9th day of the strike. Now, French officials said Thursday that they were open to negotiating a pension overhaul that has sparked crippling transport strikes, as unions warned of walkouts through the holidays unless the government drops the plan. President Emmanuel Macron, who so far has spoken rarely about a centerpiece of his far-ranging reform drive for France, told reporters in Brussels that now is the time for consultations. Prime Minister Edouard Philippe, who presented details of the project on Wednesday, said he would call union leaders to quickly resume the dialogue on the reforms. Unions unanimously rejected his plan for a single pension system that maintains the legal retirement age at 62, but with reduced payouts unless a person works until at least 64. Even France's moderate CFDT union, the country's largest and long in favor of a single points-based pension system, said the government had crossed a red line and voiced support for mass demonstrations on December 17. Vaca Muerta, the world's second-largest reserve of shale gas and fourth-largest reserve of oil, is home to the indigenous Mapuche people, and they warn that the burgeoning oil and shale gas industry here, in particular the controversial fracking technique to extract it, has irreversibly damaged their ancestral homelands and with it their traditional way of life. Take a look.
Como una empresa estatal, ellos llegaron y reventaron el territorio sin medir las consecuencias ni ver que habían personas viviendo, una comunidad mapuche viviendo en el territorio. Y desde ese momento negando en todo tiempo nuestra existencia. Un día toda esta actividad ya va a dejar de ser porque el petróleo se va a terminar y el gas se va a terminar. Nos va a quedar el territorio solamente con contaminación y nosotros de todas maneras vamos a vivir. Porque sabemos cultivar la tierra, criar un animal.
The body-folding sharp elbow techniques of Thai massage were added Thursday to UNESCO's list of intangible cultural heritage. Take a look.
That massage is one of the one tablet or one medicine to kill, let's say, the uncomfortable of the muscle and the joint. Just one pill, like aspirin or something like that. The lifestyle and culture of Thai is massage is very important thing. Because since I'm a baby, I have to keep massage for my grandmom or so and so. Yeah, since I have no nothing, but I try to touch, and maybe we learn, slowly learn step by step.
From upscale Bangkok, spas and Phuket beach fronts to modest street-side shop houses, Nuad Thai or Thai massage is ubiquitous across the kingdom, where an hour of the back straightening discipline can cost as little as $5. It focuses on directing blood circulation around problem areas to solve muscle aches, sometimes drawing winces from clients unaccustomed to the force applied. Studies have shown it can help relieve back pain, headaches, insomnia, and even anxiety. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Landmarks, Linggo, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi.
EU leaders on Friday reached an agreement to work for carbon neutrality by 2050, but without the agreement of coal-hungry Poland. Diplomats said Poland refused to agree to the date after asking to be allowed to go until 2070 and would report back next year.
After the COP25, we take this strong commitment. We want Europe as the first climate neutral continent. We took this decision with respect for many concerns of different countries, and we have also taken into consideration the fact that for one member state it is necessary to take more time before they implement this objective, and we will have the occasion by June 2020 to come back in the Council regarding this country.
We are determined to tackle this climate change and turn it into an opportunity for the European Union, knowing that right now the European Union is front runner in that topic, and we want to stay be the front runner. We want to be the role model here. We are aware that not every region has the same starting point. We are aware of the fact that some have to come a longer way, that for some regions and sectors it will be more difficult to adapt and to have the turning point. Therefore, we have been debating how to support people, companies and regions better that have to adapt stronger.
With millions of workers increasingly affected by the climate crisis, the route to securing livelihoods in the future lies in a wholesale transformation of how we power the planet and manage our resources, according to the United Nations chief at a COP25 climate action event focused on greener jobs.
We are still losing the climate race. On our current trajectory, we are looking at a 3 to 4 degree temperature rise by the end of the century. But we can choose another path, the path of climate action and well-being for people and planet. And this path is about people's jobs, health, education, opportunities and future. We can no longer refuse to face up to the climate crisis. Governments have to commit, businesses have to lead, and people everywhere have to embrace a transformation that will bring us to a carbon-neutral world by 2050. It sounds daunting, but we too often overlook the enormous opportunities linked to climate action. It is essential that we do not repeat the mistakes of the past, when great transitions have left people, communities and entire nations falling by the wayside. We must ensure the transition to a low-carbon future is fair and inclusive. That means a future of green and decent jobs, a future of thriving, resilient communities, cities and countries, and a future where developing nations are not raided for resources and human capital, but are treated as equal partners. To workers in the traditional industries, I have a clear message. Those of us leading on climate action are not adversaries. We want the same thing as you, decent jobs in a cleaner, healthier world. For that, government, businesses and labour leaders must work together to develop a pathway to a carbon-neutral world, where women and men can earn a living in jobs that will not change their health or the environment. By ensuring a just transition, we can address climate change in a way that is truly inclusive. Let us all respect the need for climate action today, while leaving nobody behind in our efforts to achieve a cleaner, greener and more prosperous future for all.
23 cases of Ebola have been recorded in 4 days in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where deadly violence is hampering efforts to end the 16-month-old epidemic, according to authorities. 10 cases were recorded on Tuesday alone in Mabalako in North Kivu province, after 6 on Monday, according to the Multi-Sectoral Committee for Epidemic Response. 3 out of the 6 were practitioners of traditional medicine. On Wednesday, 3 cases were recorded in North Kivu, including 1 in the Bayinya neighborhood, which has had no new Ebola cases for the last 85 days. More than 2,200 people have died since the epidemic was declared on August 1, 2018. As of November 22, the rate of new cases had fallen to 10 per week. CMRE said security reasons, attacks on Ebola health workers and sites by armed groups and angry youths had paralyzed work in the key zones of Beni, Biakato, and Manjina. The attacks led to a pullout of locally employed Ebola workers in Biakato by the UN's World Health Organization and Doctors Without Borders. And finally, in our news, health officials are seeing an increase of a deadly mosquito-borne virus in Central Florida County and are asking everyone to cover up and be safe. Our EBC correspondent was able to get a behind-the-scenes look at how one Florida county combat mosquitoes and deadly arboviruses. Melissa Allett reports.
In Central Florida, with its generally hot and wet climate, pesky mosquitoes are almost a year-round problem. EBC got a behind-the-scenes look at what one Florida county is doing in the war against mosquitoes and in helping to protect the public against the deadly arboviruses they transmit. Dr. Carl Bohini is the Director and Program Manager for the Polk County Mosquito Control Unit.
Polk County is a very huge county, over 2,000 square miles. So we have a lot of mosquitoes here. And Currently we have about 62 trap sites around the county, and each week we sample those and we set out traps and retrieve those traps, and they catch mosquitoes. And then in those traps, then we know where there are lots of mosquitoes, and we treat for those particular areas. Yeah.
Even in the fall months, when the majority of the country is experiencing significantly cooler weather, mosquito populations in the Sunshine State continue to thrive and pose a threat to public health.
In Florida, we basically have mosquitoes all throughout the year. By December, January, the numbers are very low, but we do have mosquitoes, and they're still capable of transmitting the diseases. Yes, we've caught mosquitoes in our trap when the overnight temperature was, below 50. I've seen mosquitoes in our traps when the outside temperature was about 45 degrees.
Well, I want to talk about this trap here. This is actually what we call a gravity trap. Mosquitoes find this an ideal place to lay their eggs. And at the same time, we have this, which has a fan, which can suck the adults into the trap. So we can get the eggs as well as the adults in this particular trap.
In order to combat the multitudes of mosquitoes throughout the county, the Mosquito Control Unit uses a comprehensive approach which includes both monitoring and controlling mosquito populations by various means. Dr. Buhini explains their Sentinel Chickens program.
Currently, we have 6 Sentinel flock sites around the county. Each flock site has about 6 chickens. We draw blood samples from them, and then we send them to the lab, and we test for antibodies for West Nile, Triple E, that's Eastern Equine Encephalitis, and West Nile virus, St. Louis encephalitis. It's like an early warning system for us. If those that particular site test positive, for say West Nile, so we know that there's West Nile virus in the area, and we go to that area and try to spray the area to try to kill the mosquitoes.
Airplanes and trucks are used for spraying pesticides over vast areas. Nick Harbo gave us a tour of one of their mosquito spray trucks.
This is the chemical tank. We have Control 3030, permethrin kind of, chemical. Much softer than some of the other chemicals used in the industry, but still fairly effective. The computer is taking a GPS track of the vehicle, knowing how fast it's going, and changes the pump speed so that we're always getting an even spray, whether the driver's going 30 miles an hour or 10 miles an hour.
To help ensure that the mosquitoes aren't becoming resistant to the pesticides being used, chemical resistance testing is conducted periodically.
At the beginning of every season, we test whether all the chemicals that we're using are effective in killing the mosquitoes.
The Polk County Mosquito Control Unit also works to educate the public about eliminating mosquito breeding sites around the home and preventing mosquito bites.
We always advise, number one, tourists and even the general population to wear repellents if they're going out, especially during dusk and dawn. EPA recommends, repellents with DEET and picaridin, they're very good. And DEET has been used for a very long time. It has a very good history, and that's what we use.
According to the Polk County Mosquito Control Unit and the Florida Department of Health, it can be hard to pinpoint exactly when mosquito season will end. Thus, it is strongly recommended that Central Floridians, as well as tourists visiting the region, take proper measures to always protect themselves and their families. Signing off from Bartow, Florida, I'm Melissa Allen, and always 1 with 25.
Thank you, Melissa, and that's the news for tonight. Join us online and here again tomorrow evening. From all of us here at Eagle News, I'm Alma Angeles, always 1 with 25.